Have you ever wanted to join a Roman legion? Well, it might be more difficult than you think. The Roman legions of the early empire are still regarded as an unrivaled model of quality, discipline, and performance. This much is commonly known, but the process of recruiting and training the legions that would conquer the known world are less so. In this video, 3 key areas will be shown: recruitment, training, and service. Potential recruits for the army could be found in 2 ways. The first is through forcible recruitment. Usually, this was reserved for times of crisis and was through a conscription. The second and preferred method is voluntary enlistment. However, there were some very strict requirements to be eligible. You had to be at least 5 feet 8 inches, which is about 172 centimeters, and under the age of 35. Those who met these requirements would begin by putting their place of origin, family name, and tribus on a selection board. This was called a probatio. A letter of recommendation from someone who had previously served could also be presented here and would boost your chances of being successful. Once that was all said and done, a physical analysis would take place. Vegetius tells us that a soldier ought to have a lively eye, should carry his head erect, his chest should be broad, his shoulders muscular and brawny, his fingers long, his arms strong, his waist small, his shape easy, his legs and feet rather nervous than fleshy, and it is much more important that a recruit be strong than tall. Those volunteers who also met this requirement were then assigned to a unit and had to travel there themselves. They were given money for this trip and also to purchase weapons, armor, and any other supplies they needed. However, they were not yet subject to the same legal standards as regular soldiers. For example, a recruit who arrived late to their unit would be found guilty of desertion, the punishment being degradation and expulsion from the army. If a regular soldier was found to be guilty of desertion, though, they would face nothing less than death. If the recruit successfully reached his unit without being late and without losing his weapons, then he would begin the first phase of training. A crucial part of Roman military brilliance was bravery and competence rather than sheer numbers. If a recruit was at all found to be inefficient, he would immediately be sent away and replaced. And for that reason, recruits were kept separate from active soldiers, both inside and outside the camp. They ate, slept, and lived away from the others. It would stay this way for the duration of their training, which would usually last about 4 months. Exercises took place every morning and evening, regardless of weather. First, they would be trained to learn the long march. This included marching for 30 kilometers every day in full equipment. For the first 15 kilometers, it was a free pace. You could walk, crawl, do it whichever way you want, but the last 15 kilometers always had to be at a running pace. Alongside this, the daytime was spent practicing stone throwing, swimming, horse riding, and camp building. Each activity had rigorous exams that must be passed. For example, for horse riding, a soldier must be able to mount and dismount a horse from both sides while running in full gear. If he could not, then he would fail and likely not pass the final test. However, above all other training, the most important was the exercises involving the use of weapons. A Roman soldier must both be proficient in throwing a heavy pilum and using a gladius, at the very least. To this end, some training would involve driving a pole into the ground and then striking it. This pole was the same height as a man and allowed for recruits to gain proper form in attacking. They would also use this same method to practice throwing a pilum until they could hit the target every time. The most efficient combat training was the mock battles. Recruits would cover the tips of their weapons to avoid injury, then fight in formation against other recruits to simulate a real battle. After the 4 months of training had ended, and after demonstrating proficiency in all those areas, the recruits would take the Sacramentum Militare. This was a sacred oath that pledged them and their life to the Roman army. A minimum of 25 years was expected, though medical discharge was also possible. Aside from that and death, any other reason for leaving service early was considered dishonorable. This oath also renounced their right to dispute any military discipline they may receive. Sentences such as capital punishment could be handed out without challenge. After all recruits had taken this oath, a ceremonial parade of the new soldiers would take place, whereby they were given their signaculum and given tattoos to represent the name and number of their unit. Once sworn in, a soldier may be transferred to other units based on their skills. For example, a soldier who was not so distinguished may find themselves as part of the Marines force, whose primary responsibility would be fighting in naval warfare. Conversely, a soldier who excels may be transferred to a Praetorian cohort who received better pay and had other added benefits. Even within a unit, very specialized roles and jobs would be assigned. One man may be a trumpeter, whilst another may be a shield maker. The different units and roles within the Roman army is a very complex system, so be sure to check out the next part, which will go more into depth about this. Overall though, it is clear to see how the Roman legions became such a domineering force in the ancient world. Thousands upon thousands of men, all incredibly well trained and disciplined, all who knew their own role and would train rigorously every day to ensure that they were victorious.